Welcome to the Fire Circle, interviews with the modern granny woman in your life. My name is Ellis Elliott, and I write a series of cozy mysteries based on a lineage of Appalachian granny women, or witches as they were sometimes called. So, what is a granny woman? Well, let me tell you, back in the pre-Civil War days in the isolated community mountains of East Tennessee, there were certain women that took on the combined role of healer, midwife, and preparing the dead for burial. These were the granny women or witches. While these women were depended upon by their communities in these important situations, they were often seen as outsiders because of their esoteric knowledge and by the fact that they did not follow the prescribed role of women at all for that time. In other words, they were often seen as peculiar. There are many modern-day granny witches, and they might not even be a granny or a witch. Probably neither. But there's someone who, when you think of them, conjures up a vivid memory, and who cast a spell, if you will, on the person you are today. These are the folks we're to meet in our Fire Circle interviews. Today, I am super excited to have fellow wilderness writer Fiona Owen visiting us all the way from Wales. And Fiona is a writer and has a brand new book that just came out called Animal. And I am so excited to hear about her granny woman. So welcome, Fiona. I'm going to have you just tell us a little bit about you to begin with.
Okay, well, thank you, Ellis, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to take part in this project. I'm Fiona. I'm of an island in Wales, right at the top of Wales, the north. And its Welsh name is Ynys Môn.
Please give us the name and tell us a story or anything else you'd like to about the granny woman in your life.
Okay, well, I've decided to go with the first name that came to mind when you, Ellis, mentioned this. And that was my friend Mandy Simone. Now, Mandy she must have died about, 10 years or more by now. But she's the one that I feel really epitomizes this sort of archetype, this kind of woman. As a kind of, she was only a few years older than me, so she was kind of my generation. She died actually in her 50s, tragically of breast cancer. But she's got that kind of quality that I feel I would call a granny woman or a granny witch. She did have a grandchild, actually, so she had become a granny by the time she died, actually. But it's more her quality and her eldership that I sort of like to explore with you today. Like me, she kind of shared a love of getting together. So I feel that we are little gatherings, there was a group of us women friends, and we used to get together around often my kitchen table.
Mm.
And I can imagine that that kind of gathering, of getting round a hearth, the fire, the kitchen table, has been something that women have done just literally for millennia. And I just feel it all took place quite naturally. We didn't set out, let's form a group of, it just evolved, and it was something that we do, and I think is replicated all over the world in all the cultures, over all the times that women got together, and they've kind of shared everything, really. through through talking, maybe quilting together. I don't do any of that kind of thing, by the way. But we did it through writing. We would,
Yeah.
yeah, we'd play with words, and we used to get together once a week. And it was just a sense of bonding. And I do think that the whole business of story as well sits very much at the heart of these sorts of relationships. And so I know I want to get on to Mandy because of her qualities of what we might call the granny witch. She wasn't Welsh, but she was very much of this part of the world. You know, she'd come here at some point, but she really settled. And there is something called the hedge witch in Welsh. Women that used to go and pick herbs, medicinal herbs from the hedgerows in the area. And so that was one. And Mandy was good with all that. She was into the alternative form of medicine and healing, while at the same time accepting standard treatment. When she had her cancer, for example, she had to have the mastectomy, the chemo, all of
Right.
that. She had to go through all of that, and that gave her a few more years. But sadly, breast cancer had been in her family. Her mother, I think, had died from it. Possibly her grandma. I know that it was a kind of genetic thing, an
Right.
inheritance. And she had to go through all that. And when it came back again, she decided she wasn't going to go through all that again. She was just going to let it take its course.
Mm.
So, that was, but I do see her in the tradition of the hedge witch, and in Welsh, the name for witch tends to be like the old hag or the old crone, which is gwrach. It's a good word, gwrach,
Oh, it is. God. How do you spell that?
gwrach, Gwrach. So ch is ch, gwrach. Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
No,
that is not pretty. Yeah.
it's not. It's very much the old witch archetype of the crone, the shriveled old, and not necessarily with healing intent. But
Right.
so I going back to Mandy, I actually met Mandy through another friend who was from Canada and had settled in Wales. And again, writing is what brought us together. And unfortunately, this other friend, Gail, also got breast cancer and also died. Now, I only knew Mandy at that point as Gail's friend. When
Okay.
Gail died, Mandy sat at her bedside in the hospital. And as she died, and I think Mandy knew she was dying, she was keeping a sort of vigil by then. As Gail started to die, Mandy sat with her and in a kind of meditation, a kind of to accompany her, kind of over that threshold. And I remember this really hitting me at the time, because at that time I felt very much like a girl. I was a young woman, but I felt like a girl in comparison to Mandy, who was a few years older, but she was able to do something like that. She was able to sit at Gail's bedside and see her over, whereas I would have gone scuttling off to find the doctor and the nurse, and oh my gosh.
Right. Right. As we all would, right?
Well, yeah, quite possibly, but there was no hope for we knew Gail was dying at that point. And so Mandy just did what I look back on as just such a beautiful thing, is sitting in meditation with her, or that's how it would have felt to her, as Gail died. And, you know, you mentioned in your write-up about the Appalachian women, they also served as midwives.
Yes.
And this made me think of the midwife, except in the other sort of at the end of life, was all
Right.
like that, you know, seeing her not in, but seeing her out of life. And I found that very impressive somehow and very different from me at the time. So one of the things I feel one of her legacy, how she shaped me, was that I feel that she had reached her elderhood. And
Mm,
it's a quality, isn't it? It's not just getting old, because there are lots of people that get old that never have the quality of an elder.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And as I get older, now 65, you know, I've started to get very interested in, well, what is it? What is it that makes some older people seem just, got that quality of eldership about them, and others are, well, it's a sort of return to childhood. You know, I think
Right.
Shakespeare got a bit about that, hasn't he? Um, so Mandy had a kind of gravitas as well as a levitas. You know, she had a gravitas,
Ah,
and she could do things like that. She had the calmness to sit with someone dying in that loving, being a loving presence for them. You know, so that impressed me. Another thing that impressed me about Mandy that I'll always remember is that we, in one of our little gatherings around the table, where we get together to play, you know, with writing and words and stuff like that. And I remember there was one time where there was a woman with us who could be a little bit spiky, a little
mm,
bit argumentative, and I can't remember what the issue was, but there was some sort of discussion going on about some issue. And the thing I remember about Mandy was this other woman said something about it. And this other woman, and what Mandy did was she went, "Oh, that's interesting. I don't agree with you, but can you tell me more about your position?" And I,
ah,
that is the way to handle conflict, then, isn't it? What a good way. It's always stayed with me. I have got a picture she painted and gave to me,
ah,
um, and which I will let you have a picture of. It's of, I mean, you know, she was no great painter. You know, in a way, it's quite naive, but it is of a heart, a kind of almost like a throbbing heart, and
ah.
she's written on it, "All hearts beat as one." In my more cynical days, I think, oh, Mandy, if only, you know, if only they did beat as one. But I get that if you go down deep, you know, if you go down into the deep, deep, deep waters, yeah, there we all are. You know, we're all
Yes.
so much that connects us. We're more alike than we're different, as the a British MP some years ago, she was killed,
Oh,
but her famous expression was, you know, there's more to unite us than disunite us. You know, we're
right.
more alike. There's more that connects us than doesn't connect us. You know, I mean, it makes such sense, but when you're looking at the world, you think, you know, that's so that point gets missed over and over and over and over. But
Yes, yes. And as you know, that's particularly pervasive in my country at
mm,
this particular time. So that just constant reminder of that oneness, and it has to be a conscious
mhm,
reminder all the time of this person is human, this person is just like you, has their backstory, has their failures and strengths just like you. We are all
Yeah,
connected.
exactly. So her painting is a lovely reminder that that's the actual truth of things.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And the other person I would just like to remember, that Mandy makes me think of, because she's got that sort of, I think that these kind of women that we're talking about, they've got a kind of edge to them. They've got
Yes.
how would I call it? I think I did write it down somewhere, but it's a kind of glittering edge, and Clarissa Pinkola Estes.
Yes, I was just thinking of her. I love
Oh,
that.
great! She's got that wonderful story about wolf mothers that are really, they're there for their pups, but they'll give them fairly tough love when they need to, when they need to pull them up and say, hey, and
Yeah,
there is that kind of edge of something slightly fierce. It's loving and it's all for the good, but it's an edge all the same, and they will, it's a bit like that no shit attitude. They won't just be pushed into doing something that they don't feel is right, and
yeah.
I
That the
think,
strength in that conviction. And for women, where we're constantly told, act like you're supposed to, this is, what you should do, how you should behave, and so on, to have the wherewithal is
yes,
a glittering edge for
it,
sure.
it really is. It really is, because we were brought up to be nice and
Yes.
and preferably obedient. So
Right. Submissive, quiet. Yeah. How many
yeah,
adjectives could go on, right?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then, so into your, maybe just to finish, in terms of your question, how do you see the role? I mean, I thought, well, maybe Ellis, you are a granny witch, and you're bringing us together in the ways of even just talking about this subject and raising it, and gathering people together to talk about it. Maybe if you don't feel like one, you might be one in the making. How do you feel about that?
Of course, well, I love that even notion, that idea, because I base all of this on my great aunt that was my grandmother's sister and lived in the mountains in this incredibly rural, isolated area. And she had that glittering edge, and she never married, she never had children, all of which was unheard of at the time. And I just thought, what an odd bird. And she always was, so she farmed the land to feed herself and her dad or whatever. So I I would aspire to that, I think. So if I can, I appreciate that idea, but the bottom line is, I just love hearing your stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, stories are very much, I think, part of what it means to be a granny witch, whatever that is, that today.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
clearly, they don't have to be like old, wrinkly old hags. They
No,
can be as
a
beautiful as
spark.
you.
I love that word. I know I could talk to you all day about this.
Yeah,
But
we'll.
we don't have the opportunity. Maybe our fire circles are a Zoom screen, and the fact that you can be in Wales and I'm in Florida, is part of where we've come to now. And being able to balance that
Mm,
with that connection to to the quiet, to the nature, to the natural world, finding the fine line between technology or whatever and the real and that connection to the real world
Mm.
and being women all mixed up in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe that really is the way forward because you're making community through the bewilderness writing, and we're all diverse, we're geographically spread, but there's a group, there's a feel of something that's bonded in the group, and
Right,
you're at the
right.
center of that. And
Well, I get to meet people like you. So that is such a gift. Oh my gosh, yes.
for
What
me for me too, Ellis. I'm so glad that I found you, and yeah, thanks to the whatever the powers were that helped me find your group. So and you, and
yes.
thank you. It's
And
just
that's probably the technology side, right?
yeah,
That we're glad that we can somehow through various means online find each other, but find like-minded people, I
yeah,
think.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're not just thrown together with your neighbours that you don't get on with
Right.
necessarily.
Right. Yes, yes, which we have to do as well, just to
We have to
navigate the
do,
world.
of course, and that there's learning in that too. But
That's right. Yes. And I just want to thank you for giving us your time and for bringing us Mandy today. What
thank you.
what a wonderful thing to and what an honoring of her memory. She
I'm
lives through you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm delighted to have shared Mandy, and I feel like you say it's just a little bit of Mandy living on. So it's been a lovely opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you.